Hello again, I'm John Lord, and this is another in the series of the way I do things, doing survey work for a wildlife trust using Litchi. Why do I use Litchi? Well, I've looked around at the applications like Drone Deploy, Pix4D and AGI Soft, and they all come at a reasonable price. And as I do a lot of work voluntary for a wildlife trust, I don't really want to incur massive charges. And the application I use the applications I use are Lightroom and PTGui, and of course Litchi. So this is my workflow that in producing a high resolution composite image for the wildlife trust. Now what we have on the screen now is a reserve. It's called Nora Hanbury Kelp. It's between the villages of Barton Mills and Mildenhall in the county of Suffolk in England, and the reserve actually extends down here along, and this is the River Lark running up here. So you have seen this before in one of the previous when I demonstrated the move tool and so on. But this week we've had a couple of really good flying days, and so I was able to go out and do this one together with another reserve. And so I was quite pleased. But the weather today is not so good, so I may as well sit at the computer and do some editing and so on. So what I'm just going to run through is the settings that I'm using for this. So first of all, we'll click on settings, and we'll see that my speed is 15 miles an hour. I have explained before that I'm using an Inspire 2 with an X4S camera, and if you go faster than 15 miles an hour, it can overshoot the waypoints and have to back up. And it actually takes longer to do that than if you fly at a slightly slower speed, like 15 miles an hour. My maximum flight speed is the maximum that Litchi will give me, in this case 33.6, and that just means that if I want to push things on a little bit, I just move the right stick forward and it will go up to potentially 33.6 miles an hour. My other settings are custom in the heading mode. All my images are going to be taken with the craft looking north or at 0 degrees. I'm using the full resolution of the sensor, which means it's in the 3:2 aspect ratio. My finish action is none, and I have explained this before, that I like to have a waypoint at close to my takeoff and landing point, so that the overall flight time, which in this case up here is showing 11 minutes, is realistic. If the last waypoint is some way distance from me and I click on return to home, it is not going to include that time to fly back home, so that's something to be aware of. Path mode is going to be straight lines because I've got camera actions like take pictures, and you have to have straight lines in that case. Curves, default curve size is irrelevant because we're not using curved turns. My gimbal is interpolate, and that's it for the main settings. So if I click on waypoint 1, we can see now the settings. It's going to be 125 feet. Cruising speed is set. Heading is going to be 0 degrees, as it is for all of the waypoints. Gimbal, I'm not using any point of interest. Gimbal pitch is minus 90 degrees, and it's going to take a photo. But in fact, as I've explained before, it's not actually going to take a picture looking straight down as indicated here, because there is, call it a bug if you like, in Litchi, and it will then take the image wherever the gimbal is set to, which is when you normally take off, it's looking straight ahead. So the gimbal will be set to 0, So that's where your first picture is going to be set. So once you know about it, you just live with it. So my next waypoint is the one where I'm going to focus the camera. It's going to be at my the height that all the images are going to be taken at, which is 360 feet. The gimbal will be at this point looking straight down, and the craft is going to stay there for 10 seconds, which gives me time to just check focus and so on. My next waypoint, waypoint 3, is the first waypoint where a picture is going to be taken. So minus 90 degrees, take photo, and then it'll move on. Now, I've seen some people putting a pause in before taking a photograph. You don't need to do that. Litchi defaults, when you take a picture, it defaults to bringing the craft back down to 0. So that is an unnecessary action that needs to be done. The craft is then going to fly sideways to the next waypoint, and that is 270 feet away. And why 270 feet? Well, I know from the tables I created that if the craft is at 360 feet, then I need 270 feet between the waypoints to give me a 50% overlap. It's then going to fly backwards to the next waypoint, and if we just zoom in, it's actually going to fly 180 feet back. That's because 180 feet is going to give me the overlap again. So then it's going to fly sideways to the next one, and then sort of diagonal down to the waypoint 7 and so on. So most of the mission here, the craft is actually flying sideways, but that's fine. There's no problem with that at all. That is one little thing that annoys with Litchi, that you inadvertently click near a waypoint and you can mess a waypoint up. So that can happen in the hub. Fortunately, in the app, they responded to requests that you can lock the waypoints. So when you open up a pre-stored mission in the app, it's all locked. I know several people have come to grief, or not say grief, but have encountered problems where they've inadvertently clicked on the screen and it's added another waypoint in. And if that waypoint is some way away, then it confuses you as to why the craft, after it's done what you thought was the last waypoint, it then's going off into the wilderness somewhere. So that doesn't happen now, because if you want to make any changes, you have to unlock it. So there is the mission. It's going to take something like 31 pictures in total, and all those images are going to be taken in RAW, because that's going to give me maximum flexibility in the editing. So moving on to the editing, the images are going to be imported into Lightroom. So here are the images, and this is the image on the first one on the top right, and then the one next to it, and we can see there's 50% overlap, and if I click again, then we have another 50% overlap, and so on. So at this point, what I will do is I will go into the develop setting in Lightroom, and I can make any changes I want to the images. Now, one important thing to remember is do not under any circumstances change the size of the images, because that will completely mess things up. So you don't want to be going up here and resizing or at all. So the adjustments really are just to the sharpness and the colour and so on. So I've turned the highlights down a bit. I've got the whites put up a little bit, the blacks pulled off a bit, and clarity at 40. I have sharpening set to 80. So, and one other thing is that I found that it's better to have the corrections, the automatic camera corrections that that Lightroom can make to your images turned off. if you click that on, you'll see your images will change slightly, and I think that can give PTGui a problem. So there are my images. Now, one other thing you can do, of course, is with Lightroom is you can click on Map, and it will show you where each of the images are taken. And this is very, very useful indeed. So there is where all my images are taken. And it will give me the latitude, longitude for each of those, and it will give me a height. In this case, it's saying the height is, or the altitude is 10.1 meters. Well, obviously we know these are taken at 360 feet. So either Lightroom is getting it wrong or DJI getting it wrong. I don't know which, but don't take any notice of the altitude. Where this comes in very, very useful is if PTGui is not able to stitch all the images together, or to find, shall I say, the control points for all of the images. And this is where I normally print this out, and then I know where the images should be taken and so on. So we've got all our images, we've made the adjustments to them and so on. So the next thing is to highlight them all and export them. So click on export, and I'm going to save them to a folder, and they are going to be JPEGs. I'm not going to limit the size in any way or resize to fit, so I just want them at the full resolution and so on. Then we'll export them off to that folder. So the final step then is to open up PTGui. So we'll go to PTGui, and we'll now load those images in. So click on load. There we go. So there is our images. I'm just going to delete that one because that's one I did in the previous demo, and if I leave that there, I'm going to get a conflict. So here are my images that are taken. I'm going to open those. PTGui is now pulled them in, so here are all of my images, and you can see PTGui has picked up the fact that it's an 8.8mm lens, which has a cropping factor, as it happens, of 2.7. However, PTGui was designed to stitch images from a single camera position. It was not designed to stitch images from multiple camera positions, which of course what we've got here. So that can give a problem. I contacted PTGui and asked them, and they said, well, PTGui is not designed to stitch images from drones. So, but they said if you go into lens settings and set the horizontal field of view to 1 degree, that will give the impression that, or to PTGui, that the images are all taken from a single camera position a long way away. So that's a tip. So I made that change, and now I line the images. And PTGui is going to align them. There's only 30 odd, so it's not going to take too long. It takes quite a while if you're doing 150 images, that's for sure. So, and there we go. So there is our stitched image done by PTGui. Now what I need to do is I need to create the panorama. So click on Create Panorama, and the panorama size is going to be 25,285 by 15,000. You can reduce the size if you want, but for now we'll just let that go at the full resolution. And obviously this is quite a high resolution image. And there we're done. So if I open up in Finder and click on Quick Look, and just put it back in. There is our high resolution image of this wildlife reserve. Now typically what I will do is now I will take that back into Lightroom, and I can then take sections of it, because remember this is 25,000 pixels wide, so you have got a heck of a lot of detail there to play with. So once it's back in Lightroom, I can take sections. I can say this section I want, because the reserve manager might be interested in it, then this section, and so on. So that works quite well. So PTGui actually did a very good job in this case of stitching. Quite often it has problems, and it is rare, I have to say, for it to do it this well. What I'll show you in a little while is what happens when PTGui can't do the stitching. The reason it did the stitching in this case is that there are good defined points on adjacent images. So, you know, these are the images. If we go to the control points, here we can see the images. So this is image 1 and image 2, so it's showing it's the common points, image 2 and image 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5, and 5 and 6, and so on. So we can see. Now, in situations where it can't find points, then PTGui will let you go in and add them in yourself, and it's quite a straightforward exercise. It's a little bit time consuming, but it can be done, and I've spent many hours doing it. So there we go, that's using PTGui and the workflow that I use. So I'll be back in a little while to show you what you can do when PTGui can't stitch. So see you in a little while.